I'm Meredith Blackwell, and I'm at IMC 11 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And this is Amy Rossman, who I've known for many years. Amy now lives in Corvallis, and we'll let her tell her own story. Amy?
Oh, how much of a story do you want,
Well, let's
Meredith?
start. You were born in...
Oh, I was born actually in Spokane, Washington.
Oh, okay,
and
near.
moved to Portland, Oregon when I was 3 months old.
Oh, okay.
So I called myself an Oregon native.
And?
And I went to Grinnell College in Iowa. My parents went there, and it was the only school I applied to.
And what kind of, it's a liberal arts school?
It's liberal arts. And the reason I got into mycology is because when I was a sophomore, I got drunk on sloe gin.
No!
And if you know what sloe gin looks like, it's bright pink. And I threw up on this white rug. The stain never came out. And as I was
Whose rug?
throwing up, oh, this guy's rug. As I was throwing up, I said, I think I need a change in my life. Do something different. So I applied to this college, an exchange program with this African American college in Memphis, Tennessee, called Le Moyne College. And there I had this incredible microbiology course. And I really got interested in microbiology. So I came back to Grinnell and majored in biology. But then as a senior, I didn't know what to do with my life. And so I wanted to go to the University of British Columbia because there was a downhill ski area close by. And that was my one major passion in life, downhill skiing.
Okay.
And I didn't get in. I didn't get in because, so my professor said, because a previous Grinnell student had gone and left irresponsibly without telling anyone. So my professor at Grinnell called and he said to me, how about mycology instead of microbiology? And I said, well, what's that? Fungi. Oh, okay, that sounds all right. And so he called up the professors on the West Coast, and Bill Dennison at Oregon State said, oh, sure, send her out.
Okay.
So that's how I got into mycology, and I really didn't know very much.
Very accidentally.
Yes.
A lot of us do.
Yes.
But it's an interesting variety of stories.
But then I think back on how fungi were in my life.
Oh.
Because we'd spent a lot of time hiking out. My parents liked to hike. And, you know, you see fungi in the woods. And people told me that fungi lived on dead things. So I thought, you know, there must be dead dogs and cats buried in the ground.
There is a corpse finder mushroom.
Yes. Anyway, so then I went to graduate school at Oregon State, and I had Bill Dennison's mycology, and he is a wonderful teacher, and so I liked fungi. But my second year of graduate school, I always wanted to play the flute. I played the flute as a child, and I always wanted to play more. So I went to the music department and said, you've got to teach me to play the flute. And they said, oh, sure. And so I had been to the Botanical Congress in Seattle and gotten some music.
Yeah.
Do you remember Ron Peterson?
Oh, yes. I remember.
His outbursts.
In the nomenclature section.
Yes, and I was horrified by that. Oh, is this what mycologists do? They yell at each other. Anyway, so I played the flute that year, and I would start off to the botany department, and I'd stop at the music department, and I'd start playing, and I called it being on fast time, you know, where time goes so fast you don't even notice it passing, and pretty soon the whole day's gone. So by the end of the second year, I had not done a lot. Bill Dennison was a very laissez-faire professor. You could do whatever you wanted. He asked me for my ideas. I was going to find out why slime molds slime, things like that. Things that are known now.
I didn't even know you were interested in slime molds ever.
Yeah. And so by the second year, I hadn't done much. And the secretary asked me if I was getting a master's degree or a PhD. So I said PhD because I know if you were a master's, you'd be almost done.
Yes.
And I wasn't.
You were procrastinating.
Yes. But soon thereafter, I was invited, Bill Dennison was invited to go with Dick Korff on a trip to the tropics, right here to Puerto Rico, El Yunque rainforest, and he couldn't go. And he asked me if I wanted to go, and I said, oh, sure. So I went, and I fell in love with the fungi right here in Puerto Rico. in El Yunque. It was so much fun. Don Feaster was there, John Dixon, Jim Benson. It was like 6 guys and me.
Was George Carroll there?
No.
Well, he had gone to Swarthmore.
He was down
earlier.
at U of O already.
But he was at Swarthmore when Denison was
Yeah,
there.
they were friends, and they came out to Oregon together.
Okay,
So
that's right.
George is at Oregon.
I think George got offered both of those jobs.
Oh, really? And he took the U of O.
And recommended Denison for the other one.
Okay.
In those days, you
you just had your friends. Anyway, so I went to collect, and my eyes were opened. And I didn't always know what things were interesting. So then I'd pick them up and put them in the middle of the trail. And then Dick would come along and go, oh, look at this. And then I'd say, oh, yeah, that was something fun. But every evening, well, Dick was really fun to collect with because he'd find a little inoperculate discomycete. And they tended to be host specific. And he was doing exocati. So then we would all look for that particular fungus. And then in the evenings, we had all the microscopes and the literature, and we'd work on those fungi, and it was just fascinating.
How much fun.
Yeah, it was.
So did you eventually pick a project
and
get your PhD?
I did. Amazing. So then that opportunity came along again. So that was, first it was June of 1970, and then January of 71, the same opportunity came along. That first trip we went to Puerto Rico and Dominica, which Dominica's a wonderful place. And then the second trip we went to Jamaica. And that time there was Gary Samuels. And the first trip I had collected xylarias and nectrias and grown them, but I couldn't make head nor tails. I couldn't identify them. I felt like I was really stupid. And in looking back, I realized there's just no literature. It was impossible. But it was fascinating to grow these things from ascospores and see their asexual states. But so the second time I met Gary Samuels, and so we were plotting about the genus Nectria, and he said, okay, well, you do the long-spored ones, and I'll do the short-spored ones. So I said, okay. And so I took these Ophionectrias home and grew them up. And then that summer I went to the New York Botanic Garden on a Gertrude Burlingham fellowship. And then I did the genus Ophionectria, which at that time was defined as have a Nectria-like fungi that have ascospores with a length-width ratio of greater than 20:1. So we know what a great phylogenetically significant character that is, not at all. So I looked at 52 type specimens. There were bitunicates, inoperculate discomycetes, all sorts of Soridariales type things.
All misidentified.
All misidentified, none of them related to each other. And so I ended up excluding everything except the type from the genus Ophionectria. And that is true to this day. Well, there are a few additional species. So then I went on to Calonectria.
Okay.
And then I started to see relationships within Nectria because there were even more species. But then that's when we restricted Calonectria to just Nectrias that have cylindrocladium asexual states.
Was that your paper where you had all these arrows drawn from the different types of fruiting bodies?
To the asexual morphs? That was a different, that one came along later.
Well,
anyway, so that was the beginning. And that's how, in that process, I could see, that Nectria needed to be divided into different genera. It can't be this great big genus. So that's when I just had to do all the genera of the Hypocoreales. And it took 20 years, but it finally got done.
So in the meantime then, you finished, you got a really nice job. You were a very important mycologist. You were in a position to be called on by everyone. You visited tepuis.
Oh yeah, I did do that.
I remember hearing a paper that you gave, and you showed a peccary walking through the campground.
Oh yes.
Well, was that in Oregon?
No, that was in Neblina. Okay, so I went to.
No, but I don't remember where the paper was
Oh, I
given,
can't
but
remember there.
I think it was in Oregon.
I don't know.
Yep.
But I had the opportunity in '86 to go with a Smithsonian group to Neblina, which is, as I say, it's a tepui at the corner of Colombia, Brazil, and Venezuela. So I can tell you there's absolutely nothing down there at that corner except a few military types who are bored to tears.
Oh, but not fungi.
No.
There's a lot
well,
of fungi.
Oh, yeah, lots of fun. But no, I mean, to me, at the corner of sounds like there's a stoplight and you're, no.
Yeah.
So I got to go in a dugout canoe and helicopters and then up to these flat-topped buoys where, you know, no human beings, but one botanist had ever been before, and it was just incredible. Just the most wonderful thing. I was working for the government and I was supposed to go home, and I said, I don't care, I'm staying here. This is so great.
Yeah.
And when I finally did go home, nobody blinked an eye. Nobody said, where have you been these last few weeks?
So tell us a little bit about your job, because it was a very special position, and,
Yes.
and few people really know
I
exactly what you
consider
did.
it the best job in the whole world, because it was, when I was hired, I was called the chief. Squaw chief. Some people called me the chief of the mycology lab for the U.S. Department of Agriculture Research Service. And at that time, it was the largest mycology lab in the world, with the U.S. National Fungus Collection, which has about 1 million specimens. The Smithsonian doesn't have any free-living fungi. They're all part of the USDA.
Yeah, where they moved, I think.
Way back
earlier.
in
Yeah.
1895, something like that. So, I mean, that was an incredible resource, and it also had this amazing library with absolutely everything. So I loved being there, and it was wonderful to be in Washington with 5 other mycologists, and a lot of mycologists came through and would visit. And before I came, Paul Lentz had gotten funding to start databasing the data associated with the specimens, and that was pretty early on. That was in the 70s. That was when we did it with OCR sheets and sent them over to the library in these huge computers. And anyway, so we did finish that project, all 1 million specimens.
I remember also you had a book that was put out that I actually got for free from my congressman. It was like that thick.
That was Fungi and Plant Products.
Yeah, that was just such a useful publication.
It was very good.
And it was online too.
Yep, we keep it up.
Yep.
After that book took us about 4 years, and in that time, I mean, well, when it was almost done, I was also 9 months pregnant. So it was like, was I going to have a baby or a big red book?
Yeah, both.
So, yeah, I had both. It was really fun.
Yeah, and I think you converted a couple of mycologists to being databases.
Yes, we had, Gerald Bills did the nomenclature, and he would sit at his desk and mumble away. And I can tell you, every person who's done nomenclature mumbles.
Yes.
So after we did the big red book, which was a lot bigger than we thought it would be, fungi in the U.S. on plants, the regulatory people came and said, oh, couldn't you do that for the whole world?
Oh, no.
Yes. So we laughed. Then we said, well, for a price, we could take a whack at it. So for several years, they did pay us to do things they were interested in. They were interested in the Pinaceae and certain groups. But to this day, there are people who go through the literature, pick out a fungus on a host, on plant host, and put it in that database. And then we have a person whose full-time job is to do fungal nomenclature.
Well,
so it's all online.
It's very, very useful.
It is.
And unfortunately, some of my mycology class students discovered it.
Oh.
And so then they stopped keying out fungi.
It made it
using the host.
too easy.
Yeah. But it's very useful to everybody.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a great job, and then suddenly I hear you're retiring. And so that was how many years ago?
4 years ago.
4 years
I retired
ago.
4 years ago, and here's why I retired.
Yeah, that's what I would like to know.
Well, I'd go to meetings and I'd see what was happening, and I really thought, all the DNA sequencing was wonderful, because, I mean, you remember the days with mushrooms. Oh, sniff, taste. It must be Agaricus stirps something or other.
I didn't really like mushrooms that well, so I didn't even have those characters.
I was like, this is how you figure out what a mushroom is? Well, and then color. And then I noticed the mushrooms in my front yard, well, they'd start out bright orange, and by 3 weeks later, they'd be white. So how can color be that important? Anyway, so and of course I worked on microfungi, so having molecular data was wonderful. I mean, it was really exciting. But as I got older and it was moving into genomics, I'm like, ugh, I don't really care about genomics. And then when I said to myself, well, if I don't care about genomics and that's where the field is going, it's time to retire. Plus, I was sick of the bureaucracy.
Yeah, you did.
So that's why there's a lot of bureaucracy in the government. And one reason I stayed research leader so long is because I'm good at writing bullshit. And a lot of times you have to write these things that are just like, or make up, what percentage of your time do you use for this or that? And, just make up
some universities
goofy stuff.
Do that too, though.
Yeah, anyway. And the other thing I believe in is only following the rules you absolutely have to follow. And otherwise, I feel like you'd never get anything done.
So you got rid of a bunch of rules.
So I don't follow any rules anymore. I don't go to work at the same time. Anyway, so we moved back to Oregon. I'm married to a wonderful Frenchman that I met collecting fungi in French Guiana. He was kind of dense. Because, okay, so when you collect, you have a lot, especially in the tropics, the sun goes down at 6 o'clock, right? Clunk. So there you are, hang in your hammock. So what do? You talk about your life. And he was in love with some married woman.
Oh, no. You broke that up.
And I'd kind of given up on men because I was 40. And anyway. So then we went to the color purple in French. Fortunately, I'd already seen it, so I knew the story. And he cried. And I thought, wow,
he cried in the movie.
A man who cries in the color purple, that's a very nice man. So, and we sat and talked in the car for hours, and he didn't make any moves on me, and I'm like, what's wrong with this guy? So I left. And then in San Juan, there was quite a long layover, so I wrote him a letter, and I said, I think you are a wonderful human being, because I truly did. Because he was just one of these people who cared about other people. And he saw for what it was. And then he came to Washington, D.C. to work at the Smithsonian, and then we were...
And that was it?
And about 3 months later, we were getting married, and I went to France. And what they say about the French is true. His parents were like, feel free to use the bedroom whenever you feel like it. I'm like, oh my, yes. Anyway, so then we had a wonderful daughter and have lived very happily since then.
Yeah, and you're still working.
Yes.
Tell me about the Oregon State situation.
Well, it's great. Corvallis is a hotbed of mycology. And I felt quite a commitment to the one name issue. Because I felt like
one
it was
name,
one fungus, one name.
No teleomorph, anomorph, separate names.
Yes, because I had worked with an entomologist who kept telling me, this is crazy. Why do you guys have two names? So then when I came to Oregon State, I wanted to keep doing that. And Joey Spadafora, who's a wonderful mycologist, invited me to be part of his lab. And so I have an office there and two really fun office mates. And so I just sit there and work on those papers, comparing
and there's to be a new mycologist there.
There is.
That's great.
Yep.
So it'll be a nice community.
Even a hotter bed.
Yeah. What about the USDA lab or the Forest Service lab?
The Forest Service lab
was.
Well,
does that still exist?
It still exists, but Jane Smith, who worked on fungi, is retiring this summer, and Mike Castellano is going to retire in a few years, and I don't know if they'll be replaced.
And Trappy, he retired years ago.
He retired. He lives right around the corner from me, so it's very fun. So many mycologists in Corvallis. And Corvallis is such a great town. I just ride my bike around town.
That's nice.
And Everett Hansen is a forest pathologist, and Everett and I grew up in the same neighborhood, and he went to my mother's nursery school. So we've known each other since we were about 4.
So your mother had a nursery school?
My mother had a nursery school.
And your dad was?
Well, he was director of campus facilities at Reed College. So. Yep.
Okay, so Reed College.
I grew up right near Reed College, Reed College. But we knew enough about Reed that nobody went to Reed College, even though it's a wonderful school.
Well, Grinnell's quite
it's a good school
place
too.
From that.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I feel like I've been really lucky in life.
That seems to be a theme for all of the mycologists we've talked to.
Yeah, I think fungi are just fascinating, and I never was bored in my job. Before I was the research leader, I was the aphis mycologist, and that's where you see all the fungi coming through the pores, rust, mutts, polypores, and lots of ascomycetes. So it's a good training job. You learn about where there's good literature, where there isn't. Anyway, so.
Well, great,
Yeah.
Amy. It's been good to talk to you.
It's been good to Meredith.
I
You're just
didn't
the
know half
best.
of this about you. So
That's
we
it.
will put this up on
Okay,
YouTube.
well,
or
thank
at
you.
least
That was fun.
Dustin will do it. Dustin Howard, our videographer.
Yay. Okay,
And-
well, thank you.
And we'll miss you tonight at the
Yes, I'm off to hike the Tour de Mont Blanc,
wonderful.
110 miles.
Oh my